Okay, we're right at the top of the hour. So let's go ahead and get started. I know that people will join during the event, and that's okay. We'll welcome everybody. Um, First, I'll just explain the title: How to Get Everyone on Board with Your Vision. And so I know that there's struggles out there when you have a vision and or an idea or a goal. And so I'm going to talk about my experience because I had an idea or a goal. There were several blockers in the way for me. So myself, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about me and my history. I'm a DevOps evangelist with a background in data and applications. And I've worked as a product owner and a scrum master. In those roles, my title has always been project manager. I was always on the product side at an independent software vendor um, for a while there. And so my name is Christine Austin, and I'm self-employed at Real People Network. So I'm the owner and starting out as an agile consultant. And so I'm hoping to specialize in DevOps and to help people benefit from the DevOps improvements that can make in product delivery. So my talk is going to be approximately 15 minutes with plenty of opportunity for questions at the end. So jot down notes if something catches your attention. You can put it in the chat panel, but I'll probably need help prompting me at the end with the questions. But if you want to use that because you don't have paper or pen, that's totally fine too. So you can kind of see the outline here. I'm going to do an introduction and an overview first. Section 2 is going to be about keeping the end goal in mind. And section 3 will be about seeking advice from ... I'll tell you who then in that section. And section 4 will be a summary with takeaways and how to stay in touch. So on the evening of July 13th, 1846, a fire began in William H. Geary's hat shop on Main Street in Nantucket Island. Two engines, the Cataract and the Fountain, reached the hat shop at exactly the same time. Their companies disagreed about which engine should be given the place of honor reserved for the engine that responded first. In the time they spent arguing, the fire spread out of control and burned through the night into the following day. You can see an image here. At the end, I'll show you the credit if you want to learn a little bit more about this, where you can find it on the web. But let's reflect here. Wasn't the end goal for the firemen to put the fire out? Wasn't that obvious? What distracted them from their goal? Well, you caught it. In the time they spent arguing, the fire burned out of control. So are you someone that's facing the challenge of having a vision or an obvious objective like a fire, but is struggling and positioning for power? It's more time being spent on that rather than working as a team? Well, what can be done instead? With my own experience, I'll encourage you to keep your end goal in mind and how patiently and humbly seeking advice from experienced ones helped me to be successful. And if you keep your end goal in mind, you won't give up when significant obstacles arise. You'll find another way over them or around them. You won't let pride, your own, or someone else's distract you. Then we'll talk a little bit about the org chart and realistic power struggles between departments. So I was working as an independent software vendor for an independent software vendor. I was fully remote. And that's important to reflect on because so many more people are working remote these days. It's very difficult to influence people and processes in a remote setting. At least that's what I found. And we were supporting a product that had evolved for 35 years. It was a very deep and wide feature set, and all of our customers were on various builds. We had instances that were hosted and non-hosted. And it was my job to coordinate new features and to get them to our customers, and we could not keep up. Our support cases continued to rise. Even with working long hours, our support team could not achieve baseline customer sat, and we were discouraged. A well respected vice president of client services was brought in to help solve our customer satisfaction problems. And his approach was to listen to our implementation teams, change the process, and slow things down. A new SOP was adopted that no update could occur without a faxed signature. Wow. The faxed signature form indicating that the customer would agree to the update. So I was outraged, disappointed, struggling with what to do. I went to my new boss and I thought she'd agree with me and she'd stop this, what I thought was a ridiculous new SOP. But there was no point in arguing. I could see on her face that she agreed with them. So I have an illustration here of a mind map. And so this is how we come up with our ideas. And I was at the action point, right? But then I had a blocker. So we'll talk a little bit about the org chart here. So on the left, you can see the client services, and on the right, you can see the product department, which I was part of. And there's a little bit of color coding there, but don't get too distracted with that. I was just trying to illustrate that client services and product were both there, and they did all report up to the C-suite. But the vice president of client services told me to stop installing updates to live environments, and I was just getting going with this continuous delivery, and I was super enthusiastic about it. So what should I do? Should I just quit, go find another company that's willing to do that? I had already invested in this vision and in the company. What I learned on my reflective walks as I talked myself off the ledge of quitting is that you can remove the title, but you can't remove the leadership from someone's heart. Our customers needed better upgrades. I knew small amounts of change regularly with continuous delivery was the solution. That was the end I had in mind, so I pressed forward. So you'll seek advice from experienced ones. You'll be willing to invest the time to educate those who you want to benefit, using whatever platform you have. You'll be willing to change how you spend your time to gain perspective. But how could I continue with everyone against me, or at least how I felt that way? So I sought advice from an experienced director, and she used a phrase I could identify with. She says it's all about education. And she meant internal education, but I knew more education would not be received well in the organization. At this point, I was at risk of having the client services and myself being like the Nantucket fire and disagreeing, and customer satisfaction was at risk. So I decided to go to the front lines and completely change my mindset of what I thought I was supposed to be doing with my time. With that changed approach, I kept the end goal in mind, spent more time with the customers. I formed intentional relationships with our user group chairs, and I began on a mass education campaign to gain support. I had a platform in which I could reach the customer masses, and I took an opportunity where I held a webinar announcing continuous delivery approach and had a key customer provide a testimonial. From this webinar, I went from 1 to 2, then 2 to 3. I gave them all the top priority of my day. Although escalations came across my desk, it wasn't my responsibility to solve or to do technical support. However, I made myself available to do that because I was in the best position to help them. And of course, it helped me to make my goal successful. So I became the triage for any updated related issues. I'd work with engineering to do root cause, provide the fix, report the issues with our quality team. And I learned about the importance of a close relationship between release managers and support is critical to success. At this point, I had to move forward, but I also had to do it without any real support from the professional services or client services department. They were still promoting the written signature for updates. And as I reviewed the assignments and made for those escalated cases, I could see the delays, and delays are what makes customers unhappy, right? So I started keeping track and measured the case closure rate, and I specifically highlighted the back and forth days from customer handoff to test environments for approval and brought that attention to management. Objective data was really key. The time that it took to get written approval was not sustainable. Customer environments were very expensive to maintain, and they caused more issues than they solved. But it was safer in the minds of client services to have customers walk through and approve each individual change. So, really, what was the best interest of the customers? And then when they were told to test, I would see things that people asked, well, what am I supposed to test? And there was not necessarily clear instructions. The time it took to walk them through what to test in the environment was not sustainable. And it became apparent that this was not in the best interest of the customers. In fact, it irritated customers, and they would not respond to our cases. So I reached out to them individually and offered the option of our auto deployment. So those specific cases where there was a test, and we found that we had the common goal, and then a turning point happened. The vice president of client services agreed. He said if his directors were okay with it, then I could proceed. The customers said, the directors said if the customers agreed, they would support it. So this is the key thing. Remembering that customer satisfaction was the end goal that we all had in common, we were able to agree. So gradually we moved from a few customers and to several. And then based on my direct path of monitoring incoming cases, I had a natural list of customers who were reporting problems. So I'd approach them individually and I'd set up new rules for their scheduled maintenance or their auto deployment. I was averaging 2 or 3 a day. And I grew more and more confident and excited as the tide was changing. Customers were seeing the benefits and we were gaining momentum. Then the tipping point came. The quality assurance team lead described scheduled maintenance as the #1 best improvement we made the prior year. So with his backing now, the engineers followed his lead. So stepping back and thinking and putting yourself in their position as an organization is really key. And so I have an example of an empathy map. I'll tell you where you can get this exact one towards the end of the talk. But really thinking about what their job is and what they're thinking and feeling can help avoid a blocker. So maybe before you take action, have this planned and try to get that covered before you move forward. So once you have that blocker, it's more difficult to unwind. But if you're in mid-process, that's okay. Just take a step back now and put yourself in their position. So like I mentioned, we were finally feeling the rewards of the customer satisfaction. In fact, customers that were receiving packages weekly were among our 10 of 10 NPS ratings. We started polling our audience during webinars and asking how many were on scheduled maintenance. Our webinars introduced ideas that are now being released, and we taught customers how to opt in or to turn a feature on through setup options. And then we also had weekly webinars for customers to be able to ask questions directly on the new feature, maybe challenges they were having with the workflow or other adoption issues. And having the engineers there on the call, hearing directly from the customers, everyone having the same end goal in mind, that collaboration with open microphones was invaluable. So let's wrap up. If you keep your end goal in mind, you won't let obstacles get in your way. With the various department heads holding back approval, we all ultimately wanted the same thing. So our unification with continuous delivery is what helped unite our company even more. The separate siloed engineering teams and services and product teams, we all ended up uniting. We had a couple of tricks about that, so maybe I can go into that during the question and answer there. Don't let pride or ownership distract you. Save valuable time by trying to be empathetic to the viewpoint of others. Put yourself in their place. They no doubt believe they're doing what's best. They're not just arguing for the sake of arguing. And then ask questions. Be curious and learn why they see things differently. Because you aren't asking because you're going to necessarily change your mind. You might, but you also are asking so that you can help get their perspective. Putting myself as a product manager in the place of the delivery teams helped me build my understanding. There are tools out there for this, like the empathy map that I just mentioned, and take the time to gain the perspective with maybe a process tool as that. And then again, seek advice from experienced ones. Older ones in the workforce are invaluable to us. Leverage their years of experience and ask them to hear you out. Again, this will save valuable time in reaching your end goal. One sentence, one conversation with an experienced coworker can make all the difference. For me, it was the advice to educate. If I hadn't had that piece of advice, I may not have had the idea to do that customer-facing webinar announcing the availability of it. Taking one customer's agreement to try and then a testimonial of theirs and turning it one into another was how I was able to move forward. So be sure to use whatever platform you have. You may need the pulling power of the customer to bring your vision to fruition like I did. In the end, client services only wanted customer satisfaction. They didn't think my way was going to work, but they were willing to give it a chance if I got the customer permission. And the webinars gave me that chance to start that conversation with the customers. That was my platform, but use whatever platform you have. And again, be willing to change how you spend your time to gain perspective. By spending time with those first initial customers, I did learn a new perspective. I could see specific reasons why our support team couldn't keep up. This gave me firsthand knowledge in order to have conversations with the directors and the decision makers, and then we could all speak the same language. And I'll always have stakeholder open microphones going forward. This is a permanent perspective change for me. Process is important, however, direct access rather than a filter is very invaluable for that communication. So in conclusion, think about a vision or a goal you're trying to meet. Are others blocking your progress? Do you feel like more time is spent arguing about how to accomplish the goal? Perhaps the Great Fire of 1846 touched you and you want to stay focused on that end goal. Then ask yourself, is this the same goal others have that might appear to be blocking you? If you can unite based on that end goal, such as customer satisfaction, then empathetic communication, patience, and a little humility will help you get everyone on board with your vision. So here are some additional resources. If you want to learn about that Nantucket fire, you can Google eganmaritime.org/news, the Great Fire of 1846, or just type in that Great Fire of 1846. I used Canva for my free templates, such as that empathy map that you saw. The mind map, actually all those templates came from Canva. It's a great resource. And I'm available for consulting. I've got myself set up on Codementor where my first 15 minutes is free. So if you would like to post a request on Codementor and I'll respond. And this recording will be available within 1 week of our event today, if you'd like to refer to it in the future. So I'll just go ahead and open it up for any questions. How to create a vision for a team of volunteers. Nuri asked that. That's a good question, Nuri. I think participating in that vision, if you have a team of volunteers, get them together and ask them what they'd like to change. I would get together in a open microphone session. It takes a little bit of courage to do that because you never know what people are going to say, and you might be afraid of saying, how will I answer that? But it's very exhilarating. I use meetup.com, and I have a Real People Network Careers in Tech. I have a meetup that you're welcome to join. And I always always have the vision of promoting open space technology for that communication. And so that would be a nice forum. Well, thanks so much for joining. If we don't have any additional questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. I'll just give you my contact information that's here. You can contact me at hello@realpeoplenetwork.awsapps.com. And again, you can also find me here at Codementor. And my company LinkedIn page is there. I see we do have one more question that has come in. How to adapt to volunteer teams with limited contributions. How to adapt Agile to volunteer teams with limited contribution. Okay, so what kind of things would we do adopting Agile with limited contributions? The first thing that comes to my mind is a chat room where you can maybe share videos that kind of, just to use a technical term, asynchronous, communication. So you post the problem that you're trying to solve, and then that group of volunteers can respond if they had time and if they're able to help. The real key is to post the problem to solve. And if you can, separate the chats, teach the volunteers on how to not make it confusing, but to reply directly in that conversation. That's my suggestion. Incidentally, that was the way that we would handle incidents, is, having domain-based chat rooms where volunteers were able to see a problem and then they naturally wanted to solve it for the customers because we kept that customer satisfaction in mind. Those domain-based chat rooms were super helpful. We have time for more questions. Sure, I can share my contact info in the chat. That way you guys can copy paste it. Diamond asked for that. There's my email. And then my LinkedIn. You can look me up, Christine Austin, Real People Network. You'll find me there. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and leave the room. And if anyone else wants to stay, I don't know if the leave room will give me an option to close out. But if you guys wanted to collaborate, you certainly can. I'll try to leave the room open. It probably will close at the 11:30 mark, though. Bye-bye. See you next time.